On our church website, we have a series of statements about progressive Christianity. The first one says that we believe that following the path and the teachings of Jesus can lead to an experience of the sacred, an experience or awareness of the oneness and unity of all things. That's the first statement. So it talks specifically about the path and the teachings, the path and the teachings of Jesus. The path, when I think of the path, I think of the way that we, from the Gospels, that we know that Jesus lived his life, that he never said, "Come worship me." He said, "Come follow me." That he spoke truth to power. He showed compassion to those on the edges of society. And when I think of the teachings of Jesus, I think of, first and foremost, the Beatitudes and the parables, the wonderful stories that Jesus told. And they were stories that weren't historically true stories. They were stories that were meant to teach or to point to a certain truth. And the bookends of the path and the teachings of Jesus, on one side you have the story of the birth of Jesus, which of course Jesus didn't tell that story, and the story of the resurrection of Jesus, and of course Jesus never told that story either. But I think that those stories were told by the original tellers of the gospel, and I think both of them were meant to point to Jesus, to say, this is an important person, we should pay attention to the path and the teachings of this man. And but I think in modern days, they're more of a distraction. The story of the virgin birth, the story of Jesus being raised from the dead, rather than pointing to his life and his path and his teachings, many people, that's all they pay attention to is Christmas and Easter. They pay attention to this miracle of a virgin birth and this miracle of raising from the dead. So I think they've become more of a distraction. But I think about when Jesus told the parables to the people who were following him, he would tell the story about the landowner who paid the people who arrived late in the day the same thing he paid the people who had worked all day. And they didn't step back and say, "Did that really happen, Jesus?" He was clearly telling a story to teach about a different kind of justice. All of his stories were to teach about forgiveness, or an intense level of forgiveness and compassion and justice. And so I can look at the Easter story, the story of the resurrection, in the same way. I don't have to look at it for historical accuracy or fact. I can look at it differently, and this is my take on it right now. My take on the resurrection is that death is not the opposite of life. Life and death are not opposites. They are part of the same thing. There's no life without death, and there's no death without life. Out of death comes life. And it's amazing that that story reflects that, because, now with the early Christians didn't have telescopes and microscopes. They were 1,500 years away from Galileo and Copernicus, so they had very little information about our universe. And so now it's different, though. We have all of that, and we can see this resurrection occurring all around us, in small ways and large ways. A dried up sunflower seed that falls to the ground and becomes its own sunflower. And then that sunflower dies and scatters the seeds, and the next year they grow again. It's just this death and resurrection. Life and death and resurrection occurs over and over again. And even us. We can look out into deep space and see that stars have exploded and dispersed their carbon into space, and our planet is a result of that. And our lives, ourselves, our own bodies are that same carbon. We, just like Joni Mitchell said in her song, we really are stardust. We are the result of a death of a star, or we're the continuation of that star's life. So we get to be part of this long continuous one life. When it talks about the oneness and unity of all things on that first step of progressive Christianity, I think about that. We get to be part of this one long, beautiful life force in the universe. And so currently, that's the way I think about Easter. Happy Easter, everybody.